Hi everyone, welcome to Writer of the Week. Today we're here with Anna Penenberg, author of Dancing in the Narrows. Anna is an author, healer, and mother. She works with individuals affected by trauma, integrating neurobiology, psychotherapy, and wisdom traditions. Anna holds an MA from UCLA and certifications in family therapy, somatic therapy, infant developmental movement, and Kundalini yoga. Anna lives in Topanga, California. Dancing in the Narrows is her first book. Welcome, Anna. How are you?
I'm good.
So can you tell us about your background and how you came to write Dancing in the Narrows?
Yes, I have a background in movement therapy, dance, somatic practice, and Kundalini yoga, and working with children and infants in development. I came to write my book because my daughter at 16 got very ill, and she was my youngest daughter. I have two. And she just wasn't getting better. We went on a very long journey, and ultimately, a year and a half into it, we found out that she had Lyme disease. It was extremely challenging for me, being her single parent and managing all of the treatments and the decisions that we had to make. And so I wrote a lot in my journal at night, and I had done that most of my life. And so from that, ultimately, after about 10 years went by, I decided to write a whole memoir from that, from my experience. And I was lucky to have the journals to refer to. And a very interesting miracle happened when I was nearing the end of writing my book. Someone came on Facebook and was looking for me, and she had this. This is a diary I wrote when I was 11, and somehow she had purchased this when she was young and had had it for 50 years and wanted to send it back to its owner. And that wonderful story is the epilogue of my book.
You have a BA in dance and psychology and a master's degree in dance therapy from UCLA. So I understand the reference to dance in your book title, but what is the significance of the Narrows?
So the title is a metaphor for challenge, dancing in the narrows, and the narrows being a very challenging thing to go through. So the other thing is that there's a place in Zion National Park called the Narrows. It's a slot canyon, and it's a trek that you can do through the river, the Virgin River. And it's magnificent and has 2,000-foot walls on either side, and it is a challenge in itself. So there's a story of me taking this trek in my book as a way of kind of reconnecting to myself while my daughter was ill. And if you look closely in the cover of my book, in the butterfly, you'll see a picture of the Narrows.
And you're a healer by nature and training and an expert in discovering the core of people's discomfort. Can you explain more about the patterns that take hold in the nervous system when we're exposed to trauma?
So when we're exposed to trauma, we have a reaction in our whole system, mostly guided by the nervous system, which is kind of a recording device, and will survive by going into fight, flight, or freeze, depending on the situation. And that will be a pattern that will continue along in your system and possibly have beliefs connected to it. And so to heal and to recover from trauma, it's a process of unwinding the patterning there.
Do you feel like we get frozen into one specific reaction to trauma? Each person tends to predominantly choose fight, flight, or freeze?
Actually, I think it's pretty dependent on what's happening and whether you can get away, or it's something that happens and you are overwhelmed, which would put you more into a freeze. And sometimes the running is happening inside you where you kind of run away from yourself. And so it doesn't look like you're running outside to get away physically, but you have done that. It's possible that we have preferences. And then
That's fascinating.
after the patterning starts happening in your system, you might have more preference for it.
And Dancing in the Narrows is a first-hand look at what can happen when Lyme takes over your life. What were some of the challenges this presented to you as a single mother with a teenage daughter?
Well, I was very challenged with being responsible financially and being the one to take her to all the doctors and decide what to do and take care of her every day. There were treatment protocols and making her comfortable, making sure she took everything she was supposed to take, and it was safe doing it. For a while, she was doing IV antibiotics in our home, with the direction of a nurse that came once in a while. And so that had to be done very particularly, and it was a very strong treatment. She was very, very sensitive to the environment, and so it challenged all of us in the household. My other daughter and I, she was sensitive to light and sound and even smell. And this can happen when the immune system is being is weak, and various chronic illnesses have this too. And so at one point, I installed these sound doors so that she could be in the living room and not be affected by these things that were so troublesome for her and would really cause a lot of pain, and to the point she would be screaming.
This segues into the next question, which is when someone has a chronic illness, it can be just as hard on their surrounding family and friends as it is on them. What are some of the traumas, compromises, and complex emotions that can occur for those in their support system?
I think there's so much loss that happens. You lose the regular activities, the social activities, the ability to do things, and so my daughter lost a lot of that, and we all did, because she wasn't able to participate with us, and we lost having her with us and enjoying things. And her sister was very sad, I think, and sometimes very angry when Dana was sick and she was a senior. Dana couldn't participate with her. She couldn't really be her sister and her friend. And when she went away to college, she really didn't have a lot of communication with her sister because it was too hard for Dana to be on the phone and or visit her at all. So there was still a lot of loss and isolation.
Dancing in the Narrows discusses there being many paths to healing. Can you expand on that and tell us why you recommend self-advocacy and getting involved in our own healing journey?
So I recommend being involved in your treatment with your doctor or practitioner, especially in the case of chronic Lyme and any chronic illness. Your symptoms, the way it feels to you when you're in treatment on certain things, is very important to put into the relationship with your practitioner. Blood work doesn't really reveal all of what's going on, and that's certainly true of Lyme. So being your own advocate is a very empowering way to be treated. It's really important that you find a way to become a team with your practitioner or your physician. This is, for your best interest so that you can be helped, and things that aren't maybe normally asked, you'll be able to volunteer. And there are as many paths to healing as there are individuals.
What do you believe is the significance and importance of alternative therapies, and how do you think they can help us physically, emotionally, and spiritually?
Well, alternative healing generally involves a focus on wellness, which is quite lovely. If you're ill, there's still a sense that you will be whole, and you are whole. So in a way, it really reduces the feeling of shame around the illness. And alternative methods use treatments that are much more energetic, much more complex in view of not only the physical body, but the meridians, if it's acupuncture, or if it's magnetic, it can treat through different types of cells and tissues. And if things are vitamins and such are being given IV, this is a faster and easier way for your system to take it in. And so there's a variety of ways that one might apply alternative healing. I believe it's better to live in a model of wellness rather than illness.
And you describe undergoing a profound life-changing transformation with your daughter. How did this affect the trauma work you do in your own practice?
I felt like I was my own experiment when this affected our lives and my life. I watched myself while I was doing it, and it was kind of fascinating to me. And I knew that I was being traumatized, and I knew that I was overwhelmed. And I also knew that I was so scared sometimes that it was hard for me to, just to get enough rest. I was up a lot with my daughter. I slept with my cell phone under my pillow, which of course nowadays you don't want to do. But in case it rang, I didn't want to miss hearing it. My daughter was too sick to call out for me, even though she was in the next room, and she would call. So I learned a lot about how I functioned and how I fared with all of that pressure. And then as Dana got better and went off to college and was still ill, but I had more time, I realized what it was taking for me to unwind the level of hypersensitivity and vigilance that I had been living in, and just really started to slow down and do small things. And so one of the outcomes of this is that I'm pretty astute at tracking the patterns and the layers of trauma.
So I think hypervigilance is something that a lot of us can relate to. How did you manage to unwind from that?
First, I had an experience when I took my older daughter to a restaurant after Dana had gone off to college. And it was really the first time I can remember that I went out in public to a restaurant. And I was sitting there, and the waiter came over to take our order. And part of me was realizing, like, oh my gosh, this person is asking me what I want to eat, and they're going to bring me whatever I want. And I realized how traumatized I was, that I'd been so focused on my daughter and taking care of her that no one took care of me, and I didn't do ordinary things, and this was ordinary. I knew that was the waiter's job, but somehow in my body it was like just amazing to me that this person would want to help me. And so I knew that I had to really go slow and reintroduce myself to life and to socializing and to changing my focus from being in survival. And, I meditate and I do yoga, and so many of those techniques, and just taking time to heal.
And what was Dana up to while you were writing the manuscript, and how does she feel about the book?
Well, Dana had gone off to college pretty much when I started writing it and putting it together, and she would come home on her breaks and her summers. And one summer, she was down in the living room working on something for her writing class that she was taking online, and I was working on my chapters, and she was reading them one at a time, and we were like talking. I was looking over from the upstairs and talking with her about certain things, and realizing that some of her experience was different than mine. And it was really helpful to us to be able to talk about it and do some healing in the aftermath. She recently picked up my advanced reader copy and started reading the book from the beginning. And I got a call from her, and she was crying, and she said, it's such a beautiful love letter to yourself and to me.
So was there anything surprising you learned about yourself while supporting Dana through this chronic illness?
Yes, I was rather surprised at how much I could stretch myself and how sturdy I ended up being in the long-standing challenge. What strength and what focus it took. And I learned some fun things like where to get camel milk. We had joined a co-op, a raw co-op that was bringing dairy and meats across the country from Pennsylvania, and raw bison heart. And this was part of a treatment that we were doing. And the other one was, at that time, marijuana was not legal, and Dana decided it would help her inflammation if we did green leaf therapy, which is juicing the leaves of the marijuana plant. And so we all got marijuana licenses, all three of us, and for different reasons. Dana was obviously ill. I couldn't sleep. Kayla was anxious, and they gave us the licenses. So we went out and bought little plants because we thought that we would grow them, because we had you were allowed to have 8 plants per person, and we thought that we could grow them and eventually use the leaves for the juicing. The whole project only lasted 2 months. The plants really didn't get that big. We had to buy our leaves off of other people. But we did learn a lot about the world of marijuana and the places that you would be procuring these things at that time.
It sounds like there were a lot of adventures along this path. What is next for Dana?
Dana is now a wonderful healer and practitioner. She's trained in Reiki and craniosacral, also doing early birth work, and she's a doula, and she and I have done some work with infant development together. And the years of her illness and what she got to experience in the way of having practitioners work on her, I think was an enormous education and something that has helped her to craft herself as a healer, which is really her natural calling. At one point when she was ill, I just started taking direction from her. She was old enough, it was a good time for her to be responsible for herself and for her wellness. And so I truly am just delighted at her ability to be intuitive and follow the healing path.
Can you tell us about some of your current and upcoming projects?
Yes, I'm doing some writing on my blog and on my website. I'm also writing some personal essays for print, and some of those are related to themes in my book. And I'm working on a new book that is really focused on the unique parenting of adult children.
Now it's time for Tweet of the Week, where we do a deep dive into your tweets and select one for you to tell us more about. In this case, we're going to focus on your Instagram because you're not on Twitter. You recently posted a photo of yourself smiling on an exquisite beach in Cayucos, California. Can you tell us more about that?
Yes, I was taking a walk with my daughters, and the sky was absolutely stunning. It was amazing with the clouds and the light and the shine that was reflecting on the water. And it was just a very glorious moment for us.
Brett Paisel, LA Times bestselling author of Mummies Who Drink and Everything Is Just Fine, recently reviewed Dancing in the Narrows, writing, Penenberg writes with a mother's passion, humor, and love about her determination to cure her daughter. Perhaps more important is that Penenberg shares her doubts and frailties as she takes on the medical establishment, her own state of mind, and even her daughter. Dancing in the Narrows is as beautifully written as it is profound. Guru Singh, Kundalini Yoga master teacher and author of Buried Treasures, The Journey from Where You Are to Who You Are, also recently reviewed it, writing, when mothers and daughters share generational cosmology, upon maturing, the daughters become sisters as well as daughters to the mother, and this is where the true magic begins. This is a book that enables readers to discover what true sorcery is, the ability to see the source of whatever it is, whether it is the joy of relating or the challenge of disease. This incredible book, Dancing in the Narrows, demonstrates this evolutionary relation between mothers, their daughters, their children, their destinies. What lovely reviews. We're going to finish with you reading an excerpt. Can you set the scene for us?
Yes. So this chapter is called Road Trip. My daughter, Dana, had been ill for over a year, trapped in the house, and we had learned of a clinic that could bring her, that could help her. And so that was in New Mexico. And here's the chapter. Road Trip. Nothing behind me, everything ahead of me, as is ever so on the road. By Jack Kerouac. I'm going completely crazy. All I do is sit on the couch while my friends are enjoying their lives. I have to get out of here. I'm sick of staring at the four walls of the living room. I will die if I don't have a change of scenery. Dana was desperate for anything to distract her from the loneliness, pain, and agitation she felt. I needed time to think about this. How could I risk taking her out of the house in her condition? What mother would take her sick child on a road trip through the desert? In spite of my fears, it didn't take long to make my decision. It was clear to me that I had to do something to keep Dana from despair. So I amassed maps and calculated distances between places of interest in California, Arizona, Utah, Colorado, and New Mexico. I began to get excited. The vision of Thelma and Louise became our inspiration. We were getting out of town, breaking the rules, checking out of our daily lives at home, being impulsive and defying the debilitating illness that gave us no vacation. We were rebels following Dana's intuitive calling. Really, we were two women in a blue Lexus wagon piled high with food rations, pots, hot plates, silverware dishes, a blender, pillows, clothes, alkaline water, and an oil diffuser. All the essentials. We were bound for adventure. We drove out of Los Angeles at sundown so there wouldn't be any sunlight to irritate Dana's sensitive eyes, a troubling new symptom. 5 hours later, we stopped in Kingman, Arizona at the Holiday Inn Express, where the lobby smelled like pine sol. We woke at noon. Dana took out her camera and immortalized me bending over the cart, making myself an almond butter sandwich for the road. She thought it was funny. but I knew I had to be prepared. I had to make sure I ate enough before we headed out, because I couldn't stop the car along the road if Dana was asleep, for fear of waking her to her discomfort. She always felt uncomfortable, and sleep offered a respite. Mom, just keep driving. Don't stop. I need to see the scenery go by. I need to be distracted from the pain. After I loaded the car and Dana applied the 2 Chinese patches on each foot, we headed toward the Grand Canyon. I became my father and enthusiastically took Dana around the entire perimeter of the South Rim, with drive-by close-ups of every scenic viewpoint. She leaned out the window with her camera shutter flapping. It began to hail as we stopped at a scenic lookout. I ran outside to gaze at the view and hurried back to the car. Dina, you have to come see this. As I helped her out, we were pelted by tiny frozen snowballs. The light was ethereal at sunset in the hail, and we were both awed by the dramatic vista of the blue sky and dark clouds over a vivid palette of earthen colors. Caught in a moment of freedom and shocking beauty, we doubled over, laughing as hard as the wind blew. Dana, enveloped in swirling white specks, raincoat billowing wildly, stole my heart with her smile.
Dancing in the Narrows is available on Amazon, and you can find the link in the description below, as well as the link to Anna's website, annapenenberg.com. Thank you so much for being with us today. It's been a pleasure talking with you, Anna.
Thank you so much.